This week marks a powerful turning point in the sky. Several planetary movements come together within just a few days, creating a sense that one chapter is closing while another is quietly beginning. We approach a new moon in Pisces, the final sign of the zodiac. At the same time, Mercury prepares to turn direct. And just one day later, the sun enters Aries at the spring equinox, beginning the new astrological year. So there is a very clear symbolic theme unfolding: an ending, a moment of reflection, and the first spark of a new beginning. But before we arrive there, the week begins with something more intense. Mercury retrograde forms a conjunction with Mars in Pisces and the North Node. This alignment brings mental and emotional energy together in a powerful way. Mercury represents our thoughts, communications, and the way we process information. Mars represents action, drive, and sometimes impatience. When these two planets meet, conversations can become charged. Thoughts can feel urgent, and there may be a strong desire to speak, act, or resolve something that has been building beneath the surface. But because this conjunction occurs in Pisces, and while Mercury is still retrograde, the energy is not necessarily meant for immediate action. Instead, it may bring awareness. You may notice something clearly. A truth that has been lingering quietly may suddenly become focused. A conversation may reveal deeper emotions than expected, or you may simply realize something important about your direction. Sometimes these moments feel uncomfortable, but they often bring the clarity that allows a new chapter to begin. And this is where another influence enters the picture. Venus in Aries forms a square with Jupiter in Cancer. Now, this is a very different type of energy. Venus represents relationships, values, creativity, and the things that brings us joy. In Aries, Venus becomes bold and honest. It encourages us to acknowledge what we truly desire. But Jupiter in Cancer amplifies emotional sensitivity. Cancer speaks to home, family, belonging, and emotional security. So when Venus and Jupiter form this dynamic aspect, we may feel pulled between personal desires and emotional responsibilities. You may notice moments where the heart wants one thing, while deeper emotional needs asks for something else. And this tension can actually be productive because it asks us to consider what truly supports our growth, not just in the moment, but over time. And then we arrive at the central moment of the week, the new moon in Pisces. New moons always mark the beginning of a cycle, but this one carries special significance. Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac. It represents completion, compassion, intuition, and spiritual awareness. It is the place where we integrate everything that has come before. So this new moon invites reflection, not in a heavy or dramatic way, but in a gentle, spacious way. You may feel drawn towards quiet moments, towards creativity, towards prayer, meditation, or simply listening inwardly. Pisces energy reminds us that renewal often begins in stillness. Before a new cycle begins, we are invited to release what no longer belongs to us. And then something very important happens. Mercury finally turns direct. After weeks of retrograde reflection, conversations begin to move forward. Ideas start to organize themselves. Plans that felt unclear might slowly begin to take shape. And shortly after, the sun enters Aries at the spring equinox. This moment marks the beginning of a new astrological year. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It carries the energy of courage, initiative, and new life. If Pisces is the quiet ocean of reflection, Aries is the first spark of fire. It is the moment when movement begins again. But interestingly, the Torah portion of this week invites us to think about beginnings in a very specific way. Because the portion is Vayikra, the word Vayikra means, and he called. The portion begins with a quiet but powerful image, a call, not a command shouted loudly, but an invitation, a moment when attention becomes sacred. In the Torah, this call invites Moses to approach the Mishkan and begin a new stage of spiritual leadership. But symbolically, Vayikra speaks to something deeper. It reminds us that meaningful action often begins with listening. Before movement, before decisions, before new beginnings, there is a moment when we are asked to pay attention. And that moment often arrives quietly. The astrological influences of this week reflect the same pattern. The Mercury-Mars alignment brings awareness. The Venus-Jupiter tension asks us to examine our values. The Pisces new moon invites reflection and release. And then the spring equinox opens the door to a new cycle. So perhaps the most meaningful question this week is a simple one. What is calling your attention right now? What quiet realization has been forming beneath the surface? And what new beginning might be waiting just beyond this moment of reflection? Sometimes we imagine that transformation must arrive dramatically, but often it begins quietly. A realization, a shift in perspective, a moment of clarity that changes how we move forward. This week invites us to listen carefully to that inner call, to release what is complete, and to welcome the new cycle that is beginning to unfold. Thank you for spending this moment reflecting with me. If you enjoyed these weekly reflections on astrology and the deeper symbolic patterns of life, feel free to subscribe to the channel. And if you would like to explore the timing and themes unfolding in your life, you can learn more about the sessions that I offered at my website, astrowellness.net. Wishing you a meaningful and inspired week ahead.